When people talk about strong marriages, they often imagine grand gestures or dramatic turning points. But sometimes, the moments that reveal the most are quiet, ordinary, and easy to overlook. This movie is one of those moments. It begins with a couple that everyone around them would describe in the same way: stable, caring, and genuinely happy together. Not perfect, not dramatic, just consistently present for one another, even as life moved quickly around them. Ken and Minami had built their relationship around mutual respect. Both had demanding careers, long hours, and responsibilities that didn't always leave room for long conversations or spontaneous plans. Yet, despite the pace of their daily lives, there was a steady rhythm between them. On the day everything unfolded, nothing began with tension. The weather had changed suddenly, heavy rain washing over the city, slowing traffic and reshaping plans. Minami had an after-work gathering with her colleagues, something she had mentioned casually before leaving that morning. It was one of those events that mattered professionally, but not emotionally. Ken wished her well, reminded her to stay safe in the rain, and expected, as usual, that she would be home later than normal. Throughout the evening, Minami stayed in touch. Short messages, reassuring updates, small reminders that even while surrounded by coworkers, her connection to home remained intact. At some point, as conversations at the gathering became livelier, she made a simple decision. Not a dramatic one, not a careless one. She chose to pause the conversation, believing it would be more polite to fully engage with the people around her and continue the discussion with Ken later. From Minami's perspective, it was a practical choice. From Ken's side, the silence felt different. Ken knew, logically, that nothing was wrong. He knew where his wife was. He knew she was safe. And yet, as the minutes passed without a reply, his thoughts began to wander, not into extreme conclusions, but into that familiar space many people recognize, the space where concern quietly grows. His worry wasn't rooted in mistrust. It came from care, from the responsibility he felt toward someone he deeply loved. As the rain continued to fall outside, Ken found himself checking his phone more often than usual. Each glance carried the same hope, a small notification, a familiar name lighting up the screen. Instead, there was only silence. And in that silence, he became more aware of how much reassurance mattered to him, even when nothing was objectively wrong. This is where the story becomes relatable, not because of conflict, but because of how human it is. Ken didn't act on his worry. He didn't accuse. He didn't jump to conclusions. He simply sat with his thoughts, trying to balance trust with emotion, logic with feeling. It was an internal moment, one that many people experience but rarely talk about. When the gathering finally ended, the rain hadn't eased. In fact, it had grown heavier, making travel difficult and unsafe. Minami realized she wouldn't be able to return home that night as planned. This time, she didn't hesitate. She reached out immediately, explaining the situation clearly and calmly. She reassured Ken, sharing where she was and how she planned to manage the night. The effect was immediate. Ken's worry softened, replaced by relief. Not because the situation had changed, but because communication had returned. A few thoughtful words were enough to restore balance. It wasn't about control or permission. It was about clarity and care. They talked about the rain, about ordinary plans for the day ahead. Nothing dramatic needed to be resolved. Nothing needed to be fixed. The moment had already passed, leaving behind a quiet understanding. What makes this story meaningful is not conflict, but awareness, without blame or tension. Ken and Minami learned how small gaps in communication can quietly grow and how timely honesty restores balance. Their experience reminds us that real partnership is shaped by everyday choices: when to speak, when to listen, and when to reach out. This story reminds us that trust grows through communication and understanding, especially during moments of uncertainty. If you found this message meaningful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue creating stories that inspire reflection and positive connection.